For most of history, we've been fed this pretty grim story about ourselves that deep down, humans are just selfish, savage creatures. But what if that whole story is wrong? Today, we are diving into Rutger Bregman's Humankind to explore a really radical and, frankly, much more hopeful view of human nature. So, at the very heart of that grim story is something called veneer theory. And the idea is pretty simple. Civilization, all our rules and politeness, it's just a paper-thin layer. And if you scratch that surface, in a crisis, when the lights go out, what you'll find underneath is our true self, selfish, aggressive, and ready to panic. And this is the huge question Bregman's book just throws right at us. What if we've got it all backwards? What if a crisis doesn't bring out the worst in us, but actually reveals the best? What if our deepest, most fundamental instinct isn't to compete, but to cooperate?
To even begin to answer that, we first have to tackle the myths that hold up the cynical worldview. And one of the most powerful examples actually comes from a moment of extreme crisis.
Okay, so during World War II, British High Command was, well, they were terrified. They were absolutely convinced that the German bombing of London would cause millions of people to flee in total hysterical panic. But when the bombs actually started falling, the complete opposite happened. Eyewitnesses described this almost surreal calm. You had shoppers still haggling over prices, a policeman directing traffic with what someone called majestic boredom, and kids playing in the rubble. The veneer didn't crack. If anything, it got stronger. Now, maybe the most famous story shaping our view of human nature isn't history at all. It's a piece of fiction, William Golding's Lord of the Flies. But, and this is incredible, what Bregman uncovered was a stunning, real-life version of that very story, with a very different ending. I mean, the contrast here is just night and day. In the fiction we all had to read in school, the shipwrecked boys descend into savagery and murder. But in reality, when 6 Tongan schoolboys were shipwrecked in 1965, they survived for 15 months by doing the opposite. They immediately started cooperating. They worked in teams, they built a garden, a gym, they even managed to set a broken leg. They didn't find some darkness of man's heart. They found solidarity. And this cooperative instinct, it runs deep. So deep, in fact, you find it in the absolute last place you would ever expect, the battlefield. Just look at this number, 90%. What in the world could that possibly represent? Well, it's the percentage of muskets recovered from the Battle of Gettysburg that were found still loaded. Think about that for a second. It brilliantly illustrates this shocking truth. Most soldiers, even when their own lives are on the line, have this profound natural resistance to killing another human being. They would rather pretend to fire their weapon than actually take a life. So this all raises a huge question, right? If there's so much evidence pointing towards our better nature, why is almost everyone convinced that we're fundamentally bad? Bregman argues it's partly because of something called the nocebo effect. Now, you've probably heard of a placebo, the sugar pill that makes you feel better because you believe it will. Well, a nocebo is the dark twin. It's when a negative expectation makes things worse. And our negative view of humanity works just like that. If we expect people to be selfish and untrustworthy, we design our world, our workplaces, our schools around that idea. We treat people that way. And surprise, surprise, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this whole effect gets amplified by the news we consume every single day. Here's the strange paradox. Study after study shows that as real-world problems like violent crime have been steadily going down for decades, the news coverage of them has actually gone up. It completely warps our perception of reality. So, if we aren't the selfish, calculating creatures we've been told we are, then what are we? Well, Bregman proposes a new name for our species, and honestly, it's a lot friendlier. Yep, meet Homo puppy. The core idea is that for millennia, humans haven't evolved through survival of the fittest, but through survival of the friendliest. It's like how wolves evolved into dogs. We basically domesticated ourselves. We subconsciously selected partners who were more friendly, more cooperative, because that, not aggression, was our greatest evolutionary advantage. And the evidence for this is written right into our biology. I mean, think about it. We're the only primates who blush. That's a purely social signal. It shows we care what others think. Our greatest superpower is social learning, our incredible ability to copy and learn from each other. And despite what you might think, our default setting isn't suspicion. It's to trust first. So, what do we do with this new, more realistic view of humanity? This brings us to the final, really powerful idea in the book, that this isn't just a fact to learn, it's a choice to be made. There's an old parable that just sums this up perfectly. A grandfather tells his grandson that there's a terrible fight happening inside him, a fight between two wolves. One wolf represents anger, greed, and fear. The other represents peace, love, and kindness. And he tells the boy, that same fight is going on inside of you too. So the boy thinks about it for a minute and asks, which wolf will win? The old man smiles and says, simply, the one you feed. And that is the question humankind leaves us with. By assuming the best in people, by building our institutions on trust instead of cynicism, by choosing to see the good, we aren't being naive, we're actually being realistic. So the only question left is, which wolf will you feed?